First, just want to say thank you for being here. We're excited for a really great panel today. I'm Danielle Gopen. I am your moderator. You probably guessed that by now. I'm also a partner in Next Stage Trajectory and a longtime founder executive coach. So Next Stage is an accelerator where we are helping startups scale their annual revenue from 2 million to 20 million in 48 months or less. We work with companies across geographies and across industries, and our ethos is really for founders by founders. So our partner team is comprised of former C-suite and serial founders who have built, operated, and exited companies in the hundreds of millions and are really dedicated to building startups. We have with us today our phenomenal speakers. We have Dave Thomson, Vanessa Nabhani, and Bill Weathersby. Okay, their bios are really good. I don't want to get them wrong. So Dave has a technology career spanning 25 years, leading multiple highly innovative tech development and large ecosystem formation, or ecosystem efforts, words I don't even know. Large ecosystem formations. And he was part of the early team at MuleSoft, an integration company acquired by Salesforce in 2018 for $6.5 billion. And he also co-founded Artillery, which was the first artist rights blockchain company and was then sold to Versus, the AI company. And he was the architect for the quality control supply chain for Disney. In his free time, he co-authored the IEEE Hyperspace Transaction Protocol, HSTP, which sits on top of HTTP, and has also founded another company in the climate tech space called Regenerative Industrial. Thank you for being here, Dave. Vanessa has built a very successful career as the operational backbone for scaling in the fashion and beauty industries. She is the founder and CEO of PlayLab Beauty, which is an innovative physical retail concept, bringing a curated selection of beauty products from Japan and Korea to US consumers. Previously, she was part of the founding team at Violet Grey, the luxury beauty retailer, and a key part of the pre-IPO leadership team at Farfetch North America. Thank you, Vanessa, for being here. Bill is a serial founder, 10 companies, although I think he's being modest, primarily in the technology and climate tech, clean tech space. He has raised over $100 million for founder-led companies, and now as an angel investor and part of AngelList, NFX, and Axial, he's invested in 12 founder-led companies. He's passionate about entrepreneurship and sits on the board of the McFerrin Center for Entrepreneurship at Texas A&M. I was expecting a couple of woot-woots. I know we have some Aggies in the crowd. Anyway, we're so happy for all of you to join us here today, and let's just give them a round of applause. So something that might not be obvious is that all of their companies actually have a connection point. So one of Bill's companies sources carbon black, and that's a substance that is used in many things, but including mascara and eyeliner. And Dave's current company, Regenerative Industrial, is building an ecosystem solution for waste byproducts like carbon black. So it kind of happened very, you might say, organically. It's meant to be. Okay, so for today, we are going to go through 6 key points that we think are critical in the journey of scaling from 2 million to 20 million in ARR. We're going to have the speakers share their stories, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. If you notice outside here, they are setting up, there will be tacos after the event, so don't need to rush out. Feel free to stay and enjoy some lunch and mix and mingle. Also behind me here is a QR code on the screen. If you want to pull that up, you will be able to sign up to receive digital resources, the things that we'll mention during the panel, as well as a 20% off promo code for Vanessa's company, PlayLab Beauty. And there's also a code, if anybody's interested in either today, staying here at Blank Spaces, or another day this week during Tech Week. They're offering a $10 day pass for anybody. I think the code is LA Tech Week 24. But if you want to sign up for that, we will send those out. Okay. So the reason we wanted to have this panel today is because, as you know, it's really hard to get to even $1 million in annual revenue as a founder. And oftentimes that first million is not that sustainable. And going from 1 to 2 is another challenge. And then once you hit that 2 million mark and you start thinking about growing exponentially, many founders say that's when the real challenge comes. You have to think about a lot of different things and new things. And so, Bill, I want to start with you. You've seen companies across many different trajectories, pun intended. What do you think is the first thing that founders should be thinking about when they're hitting that 2 million ARR mark and figuring out what to do next?
Sure. So thank you for that. I've worked with probably 50 or 60 startups. I did my first one at 32. I was extremely excited, was working 80 hours a week, just like everybody here was. And the one thing that it didn't dawn on me was I knew I wanted my own company and I knew I wanted to work, but I didn't really know what I wanted. And that kind of led to a lot of bad decisions. So I was on a CEO roundtable in Houston, and somebody introduced me to this crazy guy named Tony Robbins. And so I read his first book, and my takeaway from his book was that your mind subliminally always goes or subconsciously goes towards goals you set. And so that was the first time I had ever been introduced to the concept of goal setting. And so I was 32. I took the time and I decided I would set some goals. So my first goal, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. First goal was to double the size of the business in 12 months. My third year goal was I wanted to be a millionaire by 35. And my 5-year goal was I wanted to be a multimillionaire by 37. Same thing everybody in this room wants. Don't have to say that. But what it did was it kind of set a groundwork, and I didn't think much about it, but we started going, and we had a really good time right out of the gate. And then we got crushed by 3 national brands. And so my first company basically just went under. And so I made my 1-year goal, but my 3-year goal and my 5-year goal were very much in question. So I'd been a partner in the Big Five. All my friends were like, go back to being a partner in the Big Five. And my wife kind of said the same thing, actually. And I just said, I'm gonna make this decision through the lens of my 3-year and my 5-year goal, because I kind of know what I want. And so it took me a couple of weeks, and randomly, some friends in Dallas called and said, "Hey, we got this great idea for a software product, and you're the perfect guy to write it. So come on up." So we did. And we took advantage of the old AS400 client server wave, and we wrote this product called Easy Access 400. Every IBM client loved it. So about 3 years later, we sold that, and miraculously, I made my 3-year and my 5-year goal.
So the 3-year, 5-year goal, 1-year goal, at the accelerator at Next Stage, we have a term for that. We call it the life-changing target. So I'm just curious how you think about that and how founders here should think about the life-changing target.
Yeah, I would just say, if it were me, I would go away and do a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year goal, and just say, if somebody comes up and offers you a check for a number, take it. And everybody's numbers are different, but I would certainly know exactly what I came to work for every day and why I'm working 80 hours a week. I would just know what that number is.
And I think a lot of founders, the idea of taking even 15 minutes off feels crazy. Never mind 3 or 4 days or even a week to actually go and get out of your day-to-day existence and think about these things in a meaningful way. In the long run, knowing what you know now, that time that you spent doing that, how much time do you feel like you've actually gained back having done that? I like to call it like slow down to speed up.
It's really hard to say, but we still set goals to this day. My wife and I go, usually the quiet times, end of year, December 26th, 27th, do like the New Year's. There's not a whole lot of business going on. So we do the same thing. We go to Cabo every year. And it takes me about 2 days to unplug from email and everything you're thinking about. But, wake up third morning, I'm ready for a margarita and hang out on the beach. And I break out my little goal book and I start doing my 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals. And so does my wife. And, when you do that, you just get a ton of your time back because you're not chasing things that aren't moving you in that direction. And so I would just say, just look through the lens of those goals. And if you have an activity that shows up and that's not moving the needle, don't do it. Just walk away from it.
Yeah, great point. And by activity, assumingly an offer for an acquisition, a potential client that would move the needle, like the type of thing that you're looking for, it's much easier to be proactive and decide in advance what you want to see than have to be reactive to everything that comes to you. Do you agree?
I certainly would. And it's interesting to this day, I've been doing it for 30 years now. And my wife and I do it, and she would kill me if I told you this, but I'm usually trying to figure out what business I'm going to start next or how much money I'm going to make. And my wife's goals are to buy one less purse a year. I'm going to not shop 5 days a week. I'm going to shop 3. I'll keep my car 1 more year, but I want to, so like I said, she would kill me if I said that. Yeah.
No, but the point being, any goal is important. You have to set them. Really take the time to set them. So first you have your life-changing target. And what we mean by that at next stage is the number that you've determined for yourself is either where you want your company to exit in revenue, or for your own personal finances, what you would want to see come into the bank for you that you would feel like, okay, I've done what I wanted, at least with this company in particular. If I get an offer for that, I would take it. And then once you have that, the next thing is then turning back to the business and really understanding your unique value proposition. Again, getting to 2 million is quite a feat, but it doesn't always mean that you've nailed your UVP. And that's the time where you really start looking around and thinking, okay, what do we offer here? And so, Vanessa, I know that was particularly important at Violet Grey. You were a new entrant into a very crowded beauty market. I'd love to hear how you thought about that.
Yeah, this was particularly challenging for us because as a retailer of products that exist in a market already, we're talking your Chanel eyeshadow quads, your Tom Ford mascaras, these things existed. So why did we need to exist in this world? What were we bringing to the table that wasn't already there? So we spent a lot of time and focus internally talking about our UVP, getting it really down, knowing it, internally as a team and like the back of our hand. And there were stories we'd tell each other about why we needed to exist. But what was really important was what the customer thought about us, what our competitors thought, what the rest of the industry thought about us, what they thought was our UVP and what they thought of our UVP. So you've got to go out and get that feedback constantly. And you need to go out and seek that feedback with the intention of receiving negative feedback. Because as founders, we hear no a lot. And it's great to hear yeses every now and then. But when it comes to your UVP, you really want to avoid that confirmation bias. And so seeking that information out from people who have nothing to gain or lose from telling you the truth can be really helpful at that stage. I like to say it's like having this break the product mentality when you're thinking about your UVP. Just the same way before you launch a product out into the world, you have everybody test it and you say, break the product, find as many bugs as possible. Why? Because it gives you a chance to iterate, gives you a chance to improve, get it in fighting shape, ready for prime time. When you have that same mentality for your UVP, you know that it's solid and strong and ready for prime time, ready for that next stage of growth.
Yes, I love that because I think the break the product idea only usually comes into play when there is a tech product, less so sometimes in the B2C side of things. And so I think going in with that mentality is really important. And something else that you and I talked about is this idea of, yes, what are you selling? But what are you really selling? And understanding that that's a much deeper layer. And that really is where your UVP is coming from. Yep. And so how did you think about that? Because what are you selling? You're selling, again, beauty products that
Tom Ford mascara
anywhere.
Yeah, you can get your Tom Ford mascara from 3 different places around us. But what were we really selling? And so we had to dig deeper into that too. And everyone had to understand it intimately. We were selling the perspective that this was the best mascara on the product, on the market. We were selling the confidence that a consumer would get when they bought that product from us. We were selling an experience and that feeling that you got. And so it's more than just the transactional nature of the actual physical product, but you dig deeper and you really think about, well, what really are we selling? What are we really bringing to the table that's beyond just the transactional nature of the product?
Very much. And something to your point about breaking the product or seeking third-party feedback, which again, you should almost, I wouldn't say always be doing, but consistently be doing, especially as you grow and you are making sure you're talking to the customers that you want to have. But something that has been big in the last few years now that AI is here and very powerful, we actually use a lot of AI scripts at the accelerator so that some of that feedback becomes a lot less personal. It's being able to objectively say, this is how to think about this, or this is where it doesn't work, as opposed to somebody saying to you, oh, that's a bad idea. Why would you think that? So that is something I recommend doing if you're not already engaging with AI as a thought partner for some of these things. It can be very useful. Okay, so you have your life-changing target. You know your UVP. You're on your way toward 20 million. The next thing you need to look at is your organizational readiness and structure to actually scale. So, Dave, I know you have some stories, and Vanessa, I think you do too, but you have some stories of your time at MuleSoft when you really hit that critical scaling juncture, and I'd love to hear some of those.
Yeah. Hello. Is this working? Oh, there we go. Yeah. So really best practices, I would say in the beginning, is that you recruit from the well of those around you and your initial team that you build or people that you know, and you really go into battle with that team. And you probably reach a point where you look around and some people have done a great job, and it's now time to really enter into a formal recruiting process. And in the case of MuleSoft, there are a couple examples, but my favorite one is we had this really awesome guy who was running our support organization, and his previous qualification primarily was that he ran a 911 call center. And anyone who's worked in an early stage support organization could see that skill was probably valuable up to a point where you put out fires with customers and all that. And it definitely got to the point as we were scaling, we needed somebody that had run a support organization at a software company, at an enterprise software company, and was familiar with setting up knowledge bases and service level agreements and service level objectives and things of that nature. And so that was something where and this was really across various different roles within the company, and that person was transitioned, to another role, and we brought in an official vice president of support.
Yeah, and I think that in the next story you'll tell too is even more illuminating to that point. But I think that is just really the key point, which is sometimes the people that got you to where you are won't be the people that bring you to where you're going. And that's okay. And it can be a difficult conversation, especially if it's someone that you've had an existing personal relationship with. But being able to bring to the forefront the common good for the growth of the company, and that people understand that it's not about them and why that change needs to happen. And then, in an even bigger way, sometimes as a founder, it's not even about you. So let's hear.
Yeah. So the founder of MuleSoft, Ross Mason, originally was actually the CEO. And at some point he transitioned to be the CTO. And again, as the company was growing, we were hiring. And one of the things that was happening is we were bringing in a lot of outside folks with new titles. And so we started adding the first SVPs to our roster. And you could definitely see how it was, just affecting a lot of people and the energy and the mood. It's like, hey, I've been around, I've earned my way in. Why are we bringing these other people above me? And I don't know how intentionally Ross Mason did this in the context of responding in his own way to that, but he took a different title. He went from CTO to Vice President of Product Strategy in that context, just to kind of say it and signal to everyone, don't put too much stock in titles. In fact, if you were here early, your stock is probably worth more than a lot of these SVPs coming in. And just, really do it for the benefit of the whole company, and just put your ego aside and really allow the company to grow.
Yes. And I love that story. And I think, Vanessa, you said that actually is relatively common in the fashion and beauty world. So I'd love to hear some examples there too.
Yeah, it's pretty common where you have a founder CEO at some stage of growth in the company steps aside to a different role, oftentimes a creative role, chief creative role. So like Stella McCartney, this happened with Tory Burch, Emily Weiss at Glossier, and moving from a business operating mentality mindset role to a more creative role. In those scenarios, it allowed them to really focus on enhancing the brand identity, thinking about the brand's innovation and the next stage of growth where they wanted to take it. It can, that takes a lot of humility to look inside and think about, where is your, going back to UVP, where's your unique value proposition for the company? Where's the company going to get the biggest bang for their buck on your time and talents? So it takes a lot of humility, but it can also be really freeing if it gives you that time to go to Cabo and think future forward away from the nuts and bolts of the, everyday grind of the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, and also sometimes doing it proactively rather than reactively, is also a good thing before the investors start, kind of clamoring or you see a lot of dysfunction.
Yes. And I think that actually does also tie back to the life-changing target. So if you think about, well, what is my goal here? What is my goal for my company? What is my goal for myself? Then it might mean that if you want that company to get to a certain point, that you as the founder are not going to be the CEO as you scale up. It's not for sure saying this. It's more just giving people permission to acknowledge that that might be the situation, and there's no failure in that. And if you're clear on, I want this company to be $100 million company, great. Well, now I can think through that lens as to why it makes sense for somebody else to come into this role to get it there. And to your point about stock, yes, that's again, life-changing target. The valuation that you're working for is a big part of it. Okay, so just to reiterate, you have your life-changing target, you have your UVP, you look around at your organizational structure and readiness to scale. Sometimes that means changing your team or changing some of your processes or reinventing in that sense. And then you go to market, but almost like a go-to-market 2.0, because you already have gone to market, right? You've gotten to that 2 million annual revenue threshold. You're doing something. But now it's time to really think, okay, we want to get to 20. What does that look like to have exponential growth year over year? And Dave, let's start with you and go to market at MuleSoft. I know that originally the product started as an on-premise solution offering. And then there was a point where it took a look around and said, okay, the cloud is getting really big. We need to be paying attention to that. Talk us through those conversations as you thought about go-to-market 2.0.
Yeah, so as you said, we had an on-premise offering. We were selling into big enterprise customers and doing pretty well with it. And this was right as the cloud was really starting to emerge. And it was really important to have an offering and being able to play in that space. And so we, first and foremost, to the previous conversation, we started hiring a lot of specialists that had been familiar with the cloud market, cloud technologies, the cloud ecosystem, and really starting to focus there. And it was such that we kind of created a startup within a startup, because there was a lot of everything from the way the product was sold, the processes, the pricing models, the way that you thought about products. All of a sudden, we're now talking about things like time to live and churn and things that really mattered. And so we created a kind of a small division within the company that was just focused, and we hired into that new team and built up a new offering around that.
Yes. And I think something you mentioned that I found also really interesting was this idea of the architecture. No pun intended. I know you're an ecosystem architect, but the architecture itself didn't change in terms of, yes, it was on-premise versus cloud, but what you had built into that up until that point, you were able to leverage in this new go-to-market. Can you talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, we didn't start from scratch, and a lot of marketing and engineering effort went into understanding how do we take this kind of, for us, a cash cow, which was the enterprise business, and not just start brand new and from square one. And so we spent a lot of engineering effort making sure that the developer community that we had built up could still leverage their existing same skill set and just kind of move it into the cloud and support things like hybrid configurations of deployment. And so we spent a lot of engineering effort making sure that we were not asking companies and the developers to just reskill and learn a brand new skill. And that was just a really big effort to kind of maintain backward compatibility with the skill set and the community. So I don't know that it's usually a good idea to just try to create a brand new product in a brand new market that doesn't have any strong leverage of your existing business.
So if you were to distill that down for a founder here who's thinking, okay, we're at 2 million, we're ready to grow in this go-to-market 2.0 way, how do they look at what they have already and think about how to build that?
Yeah, some of it is leveraging your existing customer relationships and really listening to them. And as you go into this new product, making sure that, number one, you can have some of the same account relationships on the one hand. On the other, we did have a different product with a different selling model, but we did so in a way that didn't totally cannibalize our existing business. So it's a delicate dance. You are going to have to look at your product roadmap. You're going to have to think about how we can scale, how can you leverage all that came before, but also do so in a way that you're using some of your existing customer relationships, existing talent on your team, and hiring into new markets. I think that's a really, really important thing, whether it's in this day and age, AI, if you're, or whatever these, new technologies that emerge, you really want to have people that have deep specialized expertise and have them, really, really lead you into these new market segments.
Yes, thank you. And then Vanessa, on the B2C side of things, thinking about go-to-market and your evolving go-to-market strategies, how did that work at Violet Grey?
Yeah. I'll talk about the example from Farfetch.
Oh, yeah, please.
They're, in a double-sided marketplace. So we had, tons of demand growing really quickly, endless demand, not endless supply. So in order, to shape up kind of pre-IPO phase, we had to make a really difficult decision at that inflection point of, focusing a little less on our partners that got us to a certain stage, and then, picking up some new partners that were going to help us grow faster, more efficiently. And so you kind of, had to take a hard look at who was going to kind of get left behind, and ready yourself for that loss. So you're minimizing the impact to your business at that point, really focusing on the partners that you really wanted to, come along with you in that ride, being prepared to part ways with the ones that you were okay parting ways with. And then also, I'd say thirdly too, don't forget to also ready your employees, because there's also, a hit to your internal culture when that sort of thing happens. So preparing yourselves, inside thoroughly for that transition is also critically important.
I'm so glad you made that point. I will say, as a founder coach, I get a lot of questions like, what types of things do you talk about? What do founders want to talk about? And you really just expressed a big part of it, which is it's not just making the decision from a tactical perspective. This is what we should do for the business. It's also the mindset of this is going to be a difficult ride. This is going to be a lot of difficult conversations with the partners who have gotten us to this point. This is going to be controversial. We don't know the backlash that we're going to get from doing this, even though we know it's what's right for the company and future growth. And so being able to be mentally fortified for those things and figuring out how to communicate that type of information and difficult conversations with your team and getting them ready for that is key. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. Anything else? Bill, did you want to jump in, add anything? No?
That was done very well.
Yeah. Okay. So fourth thing, we just covered your go-to-market, we'll call it 2.0. The next thing that is always on everyone's mind is money. So as you are growing and you're growing quickly, you have the benefit of you're growing quickly and that's exciting, but generally that means you're also burning cash a lot faster. And you can go cash negative pretty quickly. For what it's worth, our general rule of thumb is to, and Bill step in if, thoughts have changed, but, in the 12 to 18 month range of cash on hand is a pretty good place to be in. Less than that can feel like quite a squeeze. More than that, you might have financed more than you needed to or raised more than you needed to early on. But when companies are in this position of burning cash, growing quickly, I want to talk about financing options. So everybody here obviously knows about VC, but there's more than just that out there. And sometimes it's the right choice, sometimes it's not. And by the way, not just when you're at 2 million, that early days decision to make also. But talk us through the different ways that a company can help support their growth with financing.
Sure. So I'm sure all of you guys are growing quickly anyway, and cash is always an issue. In 2016, a couple of friends and myself thought this robotic process automation way was going to be pretty handy. So we went to the CEOs of Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and Blue Prism and said, if we start service companies behind you, would you give us leads? And they said, sure, let's go. So we started 6 companies at the same time, 3 in the UK, 3 in the US, put $1 million behind each one, put a CEO in each one, and got rolling and got them to $200,000 a month in MRR relatively quickly because it was a brand new market and we had the software companies giving us the leads. And so like we expected, they all ran out of cash. And the easy answer was, why don't you guys give us another $1 million? We said no. We're gonna see kind of what else is out there. So I had actually moved from Houston to Silicon Valley to support the Automation Anywhere one, and Silicon Valley Bank was right there, and they were like the ultimate bank to go to, before they crashed. So we went and talked to those guys, and they actually had something called revenue royalty financing, where if you were doing $200,000 a month, they'd give you 5 times that, and then they'd charge you 5% a month off the top to pay the loan back. So we did that a couple of times, and then we decided if that's out there, what else is out there? So we started talking to banks like Amagi and some others, and then we found some independent people like Porter and Quasar that would do lines of credit. They would do all kind of stuff. And so what we found was you don't necessarily have to go to a VC or an angel round to get you through that $200,000 to $400,000 or $500,000 a month of MRR. There's financing options out there, but you really, really need to kind of ask a million questions and really understand it. And this morning I was looking at your website and I noticed 3 or 4 of those logos on your website.
Yes, the Houston ecosystem. I don't think I mentioned, but this next stage originated out of Houston, even though we are across the country with our partners.
Yeah, so we did that. It worked like a champ. Anytime you can get, it's expensive. They wanted 12 to 15% interest, but as you're moving from 200 a month to 300 a month to 400 a month, your enterprise value is moving from 2x to 3x to 4x. So it may sound like it's really expensive, but the more equity you can hang on to for the longer trip, your enterprise value keeps going up. So when you look at, having to give 10 or 15% of your company away for the same amount of money, I think it's a much better way to go. So when we work with founders now, I typically just say, I know you're not going to like this answer, but we're going to call, Silicon Valley Bank. They're still around. We're going to go to Quasar and Porter, and we're going to figure out how to do this to keep the equity in your pocket. And we're going to get you into that $300,000 or $400,000 a month range. And then at that point, you're worth quite a bit more. So if you do have to go out again, the ask is much, much better.
Yeah, and I think something important there is also, as a founder, you're so heads down on what you're working on. You're not always noticing the world around you. And so in the last few years, obviously, interest rates have changed a lot. Well, up and then recently a bit back down. But if you're not paying attention to things like that and you just think single mode, oh, this is the one way to get money, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Whereas taking a minute, again, this slow down to speed up, taking a minute to evaluate the environment, the market in the moment that you are looking for cash, to see that there could be better options out there than the ones you already know. And I think, Dave, there's one that you mentioned that I actually am not that familiar with. It was like QBSR.
Yeah, QSBS.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean there are lots of options that the government puts out. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of opacity with respect to those processes. There's SBIR. There's all sorts of, depending on the type of business that you're in. QSBS, Qualified Small Business Subsidy, is just it basically allows you to, again, for certain types of businesses, you can basically, on an equity basis, you can get 10 times your money, or $10 million tax-free at the end of 5 years. And so these are the types of things where, if you start to understand these government programs, grants, all of these types of non-dilutive financing options, and also programs that you can participate in that make your venture much more attractive to investors.
Yes. And by the way, if you haven't scanned the QR code already, if you want to do that now, we will mention some of these things in the one pager that we sent out. But yes, I think that also, Vanessa, I just noticed your shoes. I love those. Yeah. Yes. Go Dodgers. I think that is the key point, is to know that you have different options and to evaluate what makes sense for you and your business, not just to go the way that everybody is going. Okay, so still on the money topic, the idea is that now that you've completed steps 1 through 5 really diligently, that you are preparing for an exit. And it's never too early to plan for that. It might feel very far away, but when it does happen, it catches you off guard. And a lot of things do need to be in place for you to be protected, legally, financially, all of that. And so we just want to talk through a little bit about, what does preparing for an exit and planning for an exit look like? And what should you be thinking about even, years before that? So Bill, I'll leave that one with you for right now.
Yeah. So when I was in my 30s and we actually won and we took a big check, quite frankly, I didn't care about wealth planning whatsoever. I was so happy to get the freaking money. I was buying a boat and a house, and I was buying all kinds of stuff. I could care less. But the older you get and the older your kids get, you really should kind of take a look at wealth planning on your exit strategy. I did that in my 40s, and I've consistently done it. And in retrospect, looking back, if I would have done that on my first exit, I probably could have saved $1 million or $1.5 million in taxes. I just didn't know. And like I said, I was so excited about getting the money, I didn't care. But I would suggest, as you get close, go find a wealth advisor. And that space is highly, highly regulated. You can kind of pick the one you want. We throw 3 or 4 names out, but I'm going to use the word, it's kind of like dating, and I'm going to use that positively. All of them do the same thing. They have the same products. It's really just, do you like the person you're dealing with or not? And because they're going to know everything about you, they're going to know your net worth, where your kids are going to school, what kind of car you drive. They know everything about you. So you really have to just trust that person.
Yes. And just to reiterate, because I do have a background on the finance side and a few years in the private wealth world, and really make sure it's not just someone you trust because it's your neighbor's friend who said, oh, I can help you with that, but somebody who has all of the proper licenses and regulations and is supported by a really good firm that you can get your services from and know. I mean, yes, the big ones, Merrill Lynch, UBS, everybody knows those, but even the more independent ones, just making sure you really vet who they are, because you are giving them carte blanche access to everything. You want to be clear about who you're doing that with. And along those same lines, making sure you also have really good attorneys, personal attorneys. And you're nodding. Do you have comments on that?
Yeah. Doctors, lawyers, cops, you don't necessarily think of them until you really need them. And it's good to have them lined up and, being able to understand how to use them and also manage them. They are going to have, ideally, the code of ethics regarding looking out for their clients. But, you have to be your own lawyer first, your own doctor first, maintain your own security and sense of self first. So I think it's just those are important relationships to have. And on the wealth advising side, yeah, just interview and all of these folks. That's, I think, applies to all these categories of service providers, is just really date a lot of them and make sure you're really, really comfortable with them. They're very important.
Yes, and something I'll add, this is with a disclaimer, I'm not liable, make your own decisions. Something I'll add that you could even do now as you are planning for a potential future exit is just reevaluate your current business structure and entity structuring and how things have been set up legally to make sure it is well suited for what you're looking for, if and when you come to an exit.
One other thing I'd like to add is, as you get used to, or you're ready for your exit, find a really good lawyer and understand what your limits of liability are, because when your LPs or your friends or some of your clients or whoever finds out you got a big check, you do that 3 or 4 times, I can guarantee you will be sued. I've been sued countless times for frivolous crap, and I've won every single time. But if I didn't have the legal structure I had and the help we had, you never know what the outcome would be. So if you do this long enough, it's going to happen to you. Just be really smart about how you structure all your business transactions.
Yes. Thank you. Vanessa, anything you want to chime in with? Good. Okay. Okay. So we want to leave some time for Q&A. And so I just will have a mic roaming around in the audience somewhere around here. But if you have a question, just feel free, if you want to introduce yourself, up to you, but we're here to answer any questions that you have. Great. We have here in the front.
Thank you. Simple question. Potentially complicated. Oh, you guys hear me okay? All right.
It's cutting in and out.
So, simple question, possibly complicated answer. How do you hire executives? I mean, what's the first thing you ask? I know, Bill, you started a few different companies. You've replaced CEOs in them. Just for some context, I'm a serial entrepreneur, built a few different companies, sold them. But never really been at a big company, around a lot of executives to sort of learn from necessarily. And I'm getting to that point where we're trying to grow in a certain way. We need to hire some real leadership. So how do you do it?
Yes, I'm just going to repeat the question because it cut in and out a bit. So the high-level question is, how do you hire the executives? How do you know who is the right executive to hire? How do you think about it? What questions do you ask?
I'll take that one. So we were a little bit lucky in that we had some decent VC backing. So we ran most of our executives through kind of what we called our social network. What's the good, the bad about them? Do they work 80 hours like you? Is there anything negative? But I can tell you, we've hired hundreds and hundreds of people. And if you think you're not going to make a mistake, you're crazy. So I hired an insanely good CEO to run one of our companies, lived here in Hollywood. And he kicked ass for about a year and decided he didn't want to do it anymore, so he quit coming to work. And I had to fire him. So, and that caused a lawsuit. So you just never know kind of what's going to happen. So what we do is we put people through just our social network, and we, if we're going to hire Bob, we just send out a message to all the people we know and say who's got good, bad, or indifferent feedback from this person, and then we just kind of listen to the network.
I'll add to remember the saying, always wrong, true for me, hire slow, fire fast. So don't be afraid to take action because there's such thing as them doing more harm than good. If you want to kind of take your time, feel it out, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah, I'll add to that too, that the process is a great one and important because recruiting is kind of everything. Right after you raise money, it's just about hiring. That becomes your sole focus. And actually, it's a great opportunity to see how your culture is, how your message is landing. Are you able to attract the top talent for your next round? And it's a very important sales process. You can kind of think about it like that. You're basically asking people, they're typically not available, the ones that you want. And so that's a tough sell. You're asking them often to take a pay cut, to move, And it's a really important sale. That's a tough close. Say like move your entire family, take a big risk on this new thing, but actually use that as a signal of intelligence of how you're doing in the market, how your message is landing, and run that like its own kind of product, kind of development effort. You're testing the messaging of the product. Use that as that for your company and the culture and everything like that. So enjoy the process and learn from it as much as.
Yes, agree. I love how you tied it back to what I was thinking, the unique value proposition. As much as that is to your customers, it also is to on the recruiting side. And so there's a hiring methodology that I personally really love. It's called Who, the hiring A player. I think it's what it's called. The book is called, but it's by Jeff Smart, Geoff. He is the founder and CEO of GH Smart, which is the world's largest human capital consulting firm. And listen, if you're hiring your early executives, you probably aren't going to use a firm like GH Smart because they're extremely expensive. If you're hiring a Fortune 500 company, it's worth what you're paying them to make sure it's the right CEO. But to look at some of their research and how they think about assessing executives and senior leadership. And the biggest thing I would say is also, I think honestly, the biggest message I would want to leave everybody here with is slow down to speed up. And so this is another example of that. Prepare to hire before you're actually ready to hire. So think about, who do we need in this role? What does that look like? Maybe even months before you're actually ready to make that decision, because you don't want to be stuck with making a firestorm decision of who's in front of you at that moment. And okay, I guess they're good enough. And like Dave said, if you are looking for someone very particular, you probably have to recruit them from somewhere else, and that takes time. And the other thing, my personal opinion, just working with a lot of people on this, if you're hiring an executive, depending on what your company is, one, obviously make sure there's a lot of cultural alignment, that they're growth minded, and that you will be able to work well together in that sense. But when it comes to comp, you probably also have to pay them more like an executive, especially if you're recruiting them away from a big place.
Hi, thank you. My name's Leon, founder of G-Date. I just wanted to ask, what are the main, to kind of follow up on what you guys were talking about, some of the main psychological traits that you've seen in the employees that you found were like really, really good, and maybe even vice versa, really, really bad? And also, what are some of the catastrophic mistakes you've seen other founders make that almost killed the company just because they didn't know any better?
I'll take
Whole nother panel.
I'll take the catastrophic side. I would say on the business structuring side, especially early on, don't try to be innovative. There are really good reasons why structures kind of emerge and evolve into what they are. And if you're trying to do something too fancy around your cap table or your business structure, it's going to add friction, and it's just going to add risk, and it can be very catastrophic and it's not really adding a lot of value to what you're doing if somebody shows up and you've got this really, kind of crazy structure.
Yeah, one of the things that we really stress is be kind of maniacal about sales. So for the founders that don't kind of make it, they'll hire a sales organization because at some point you can't get you to 2 to 4, 4 to 8, so you're having to give sales to somebody else. And they've never run a sales organization. So, you show up for a quarterly review and you're 72% of plan and nobody gets in trouble for that. That is an absolute way to fail. So, hire people that live up to plan, and you have to be really firm. If I showed up to a quarterly meeting and we were 72% of plan, I'd put everybody on notice. And if you didn't make it next quarter, I'd fire you. I'd start over. So, you have to drive kind of the outcome you want, but we've always been known for really, really aggressive sales teams.
I'll say the understanding the culture. So, if you're hiring an executive who's established from a different industry, I'll give you an example from Farfetch. We had this company started tech culture. Then it became, well, we need to, in order to compete with the LVMHs of the world, we need fashion people, fashion executives. And those two cultures do not get along well, or don't understand each other. So I think there's, to slow down, to speed up. If we took the care to really understand the unique cultures of those two worlds and understand how to bring them together in a productive way. Instead of just kind of pulling pieces together. It's the best of this world, the best of this world, the best of this world. It's like creating a rock band with 5 singers. They're all the best singers, but you don't have this melody, this music, so this harmony. So I think there's a bit of that too. When you're, going so quickly and just thinking about getting the best team together, really understand how they're going to play well together and take time to nurture that.
Yes, I love that. And actually, so going back to the Who hiring method, the premise of that methodology is building a scorecard. And the scorecard has 2 components. One are the actual experience that you need for that role and for that person to be successful in that role, what their background should be, and the experience and track record that they have to date. And then the other component is characteristics. And so you actually can decide for what role you're hiring for, what are the important characteristics for someone in that role, because there could be variance in what you need from someone on the sales side versus what you need from someone on the development side versus what you need someone on the operations side. That can change. But high level, I think having a growth mindset, and by that I mean that they're open to feedback, willing to have hard conversations, not overly defensive when things don't go well, willing to take accountability, and then also intellectually curious, and they're excited and they care about the business and what you're building. It's not just a job to them. This is a whole other conversation, but was it like already a couple months ago, the viral founder mode, yes, got a lot of attention. And the idea of, when you hire people, do you just delegate and tell them what to do? Well, they're never going to do what you would do as a founder because it's not their company. But finding people who feel as close to that as possible, that they really are bought into what you're building together, I think is somewhere to start.
Hey, Alan King here with FunJoin. I had a question about onboarding and activation. Currently, that's our biggest bottleneck, and we're hiring PLG people. What do you individually recommend for anything you've seen in a self-service kind of activation or onboarding, things that worked really well to help scale from 2 million to 20 million?
Are you guys good with the question, or do you want a little bit more clarification?
Self-service way, meaning
They go online and they can sign up, and then they can start using software, getting to value and activation. They're activating the software. They're getting that value.
an automated onboarding process, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Automating that, that's been our biggest bottleneck. Everything currently is a collaborative process, so we take them through it one-on-one.
But ideally, you want to scale it so that you don't have to do.
We're working on that. We're currently dissecting our one-to-one collaborative way and how do we make this into, because the software is very customizable.
Any thoughts here?
That's a good one. I could see how that would be a necessary, just really valuable process. I don't know of a category of software which is really focused on that. I think there are probably a lot of learning management systems and training systems out there that you would probably need to pull together, but I don't honestly know of a specific SaaS category around onboarding specifically, other than just training, general training modules that would be a part of the process.
I'll just add that so at Farfetch we had system software like this to onboard all of our boutiques. They're not employees, but they were getting into pulling into the system, and it was great, for scale wise. But I'll just caution that when we did that, it became more of a humanless, emotionless experience. And a lot of the onboarding is also onboarding them into the culture. And that's the technology, the software isn't going to be as good about explaining why these things need to happen, why they're doing certain things. It's more about the how. And the why, especially when you are pulling somebody into your world and being able to, replicate your UVP out there in the world is critically important, especially at that stage. That's the only thing I'll kind of caution from what I've seen where that, doesn't go so well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is There's a website out there called NFX. They're out of Silicon Valley. They actually created something called network effects. It's out there on their website. You can go download it. There's 16 of them. We use a lot of AI scripts when we get asked those kind of questions to basically put your business model into their formula and come up with whatever network effect they think you are. And if you can figure out what network effect you have, there's countless case studies out there on how to make it best in class. And so I would go to NFX and see kind of what my network effect was, and then I would do a bunch of research and say, how do I be the best at that network effect? And those people are stupidly smart, wickedly smart. And so I would go see what they had to say.
Yeah, and I think, this is actually a perfect example of really knowing your UVP. And so it's knowing what experience do you want your customers to have? Do you want them to have the high touch experience where they are onboarded in a one-to-one way and that is integral to whatever it is that you're selling? Or is this more of a faceless, nameless, automated process? And if that's the case, I'm sure there's a case for AI there.
Yeah, that's all people. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
The question was,
How
is
are
it
we on
is it NFX.com? The answer is that yes. Yes, it is.
How are we on time?
Bart?
Time.
15 now.
Okay. Let's say 1 to 2 more questions. Yeah.
Hi, Kat Wynn with SparkedInnovations.a, CEO and founder. As you're scaling from 2 to 20, what are some thought processes or exercises you go through to determine where you spend your money?
I'll take that one first. So most of the time, the go-to-market strategy is where most of your money is going to go. And that could either be direct sales, it could be B2C, subscriptions, it's whatever. But I would allocate quite a bit of that to your go-to-market strategy. And that's either sales or marketing. But you're still going to have to hire some good people. So your SG&A will go up as well. But most of the time, you got to add new clients to get to 4 million. And that's just sales and marketing.
Yeah, I think, well, it depends on the type of business you are, but generally speaking, if you're on the tech side, your highest costs early on are development costs. And then as you grow and scale, regardless of the business you are, human capital is your biggest cost, and making sure that you're hiring the right people for what you're trying to build is my very, very high level answer. Yeah. Anything, yeah.
Yeah, I think marketing is, sales and marketing. The marketing side is, I think, the hardest one to know, because especially in this world, you can spend such unlimited amount of money on it, but figuring out the right kind of marketing, where that's coming from, making sure that your existing customers are the ones, and existing relationships and stakeholders are driving a lot of that, rather than trying to create a signal. And so marketing can be a bit of it's just a harder thing to figure out exactly how to do that allocation, but it's certainly a part of it. But figuring out how to allocate it as efficiently and with as much leverage as possible, I think, is a really important consideration.
Yes. Okay. Let's just see a show of hands of who still has a question, and then
One right there.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's just do these 3, but we might give slightly shorter answers.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This has been great. My name's Rushi Ganmuki. I'm the CEO of Bull AI. We're in this range. And I'd say my one question for you guys is, by the time a company gets to 2 million ARR, what typically do you see in that company that they should have done by now, but they haven't done? Like, what is the one thing you're like, because 2 million comes up fast. It comes up faster than you think, and many companies are lacking by then. And so what would you say, typically the one thing you're like, oh, you should have done this by now. Go do it. Go do that first. What would that be?
My quick answer is the first 2 things that we said. If you haven't already determined a life-changing target, or what your really, like, what your number is for what you're trying to build. And if you really don't know your UVP, so if you got to 2 million, but it was kind of cobbled together more or less, especially going through certain programs where it's highly incentivized to get to your first million, but it's not necessarily the million that you're going to grow with, would be my quick answer. But
Yeah, I would say she hit it. Your unique value prop. So nowadays you can kind of brute force your way into 150, 180 grand. and you think you're going to go to 3 or 4, but if you really haven't kind of thought about how you fit in the market, use some AI scripts to ask for help, understand, we call them swim lanes, understand your swim lane against your competition, you're going to you won't scale. What you'll do is just spend another year and your revenue won't grow because your message just isn't quite on target.
That was a really good question. I also think it's important for companies to decide what they don't want to do and what markets they're not in. And I think that's something that not enough time is spent. In the beginning, you have, this great grand vision and this idea as you're getting down and narrowing and focusing, figuring out what kind of businesses you're not in is something I think not a lot of folks spend enough time thinking about. And where do you not want to go?
Yeah, that's something I have actually learned a lot from Dave on, is this idea of everybody feels like they want to do it all and have to do it all when they're starting a company, but really focus on what you do best and leaving the rest to other players in the market. And I guess that's part of being an ecosystem architect, is understanding how those pieces fit together. But I think that is something to really think about, that you don't have to do it all. And if you have been doing that up until this point, it might be time to actually refine a bit.
So my question is, at what point do you think it's best for either a founder or a founding team to start scaling sales? Do they need to have figured out like product market fit yet, or a strategy that works? Or would you bring someone in that potentially is an expert, but maybe not, and then you're spending a lot of money trying to find that expert, as opposed to actually selling? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think as you start to build a formal sales organization, be careful. The really good ones are really expensive, and they're going to want to see a lot of infrastructure to support them. They want to see product marketing materials. In the beginning, I think everybody's doing sales. Ideally, everybody's evangelizing and for the product and the company. And so I just think be ready. It's a really important step to take in an organization. But unless you're ready, bringing in hard charging salespeople, that when you're not ready, they'll just sit around and get really frustrated and say, I don't have the support I need. And no, you're going to waste a lot of money.
One other thing that we witnessed quite a bit is, as a startup, we've hired people from Oracle and Microsoft and you name it. And I would now, when we do that, I want to understand if you're good enough to sell without a brand. So it's one thing to sell when you're at Oracle and Microsoft. It's a whole nother thing when nobody's ever heard of your brand and you sit in front of somebody and convince them to buy it. That's true sales. And so we just hadn't had a lot of luck hiring people from those kind of groups. So I would just ask, have you ever or ever not sold without a brand?
Yes, I think that's a great point. And I would actually even, and not right now, but in general, take that question maybe even one step back, which is, how do you even define sales? Like, what do you mean by that? Is it that you're ready in the moment to get those customers signing contracts or, out in a B2C format? Or do you mean something that's a bit more top of the funnel, that it's maybe a different approach, if that makes sense?
Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for having this. My name's Phil Hong. I'm the CEO and founder of Trinity AI. I'm curious on how you think of when a business is ready to move into enterprise. As a startup, I think there's a lot of volume with the small startups and we can get a lot of business going. And I've seen this fail at a previous company that I used to work at. So I'm very curious on when you think a business is ready for enterprise and when it's worth spending the 12, 24-month sales cycles to close enterprise.
That's a good one. I think, I guess kind of when you're ready, I mean, yeah, it's expensive, it's risky. I think when you can support it as a business, that's when just the bigger checks start coming in. That's when you're going to start to be able to, just drive a lot more revenue. I would say start small there, really, rather than trying to get 10 big enterprise customers, get 1 or 2, then really sell in, really, land and expand within a couple, really understand that you're organizationally ready to support that, and definitely bring some folks that have sold into that space, that have existing accounts, existing friendly relationships. That's a good time to bring in folks like that can make some calls to their golf buddies or whatever, not to be cliche, but that can say like, yeah, hey, I've got this thing, and will you really kind of work with us as we're getting into that mode. But yeah, when you're ready. But it's an important transition, and it's a challenging one.
Yeah, so we have a kind of an internal term we laugh about called ethically cheating. So we like to cheat, and so instead of trying to figure out how to go hire Salesforce and do that, like when we had the company in Silicon Valley behind Automation Anywhere, I just walked into Mahir's office and said, I need a Fortune 500 somewhere down the valley. Get me in one. And so within 6 months, we were in Adobe, Kaiser Permanente, Netflix, and I couldn't have sold that in half a lifetime. So we like to cheat, so find somebody in your network that can get you a contact with one of those guys. And if you can just get one, the rest will start to show. But we try to circumvent that just as much as we can, because it takes forever.
Yeah, maybe starting with smaller ones first, rather than the really big enterprises. There is a correlation between the size and the amount of bureaucracy, and they'll bleed you out. Also, be really, really careful of the market that you're going into and the market segment. Typically, the early adopters are in the finance and media space. And so if you're trying to sell into other types of enterprises, you're going to hit a lot more roadblocks in terms of the time, and also things like regulations and just weird budget machinations and things like that.
Yeah, and I think, actually that is part of our expertise at Next Stage, and part of scaling the 2 to 20 is introducing companies to enterprise accounts. And I think it's been mentioned, but this idea of having a partner in that, being able to have those warm introductions, being able to even talk to those companies before you're ready to fully sell to them, so that you are gathering feedback from them, so that when you come to the table with the true sale, you know what they're looking for, and hopefully can help expedite that decision-making process on their end.
Yeah, and get money out of them. Don't get paid pilots or whatever that looks like for you. Get money out of them in the beginning to do a lot of the work of value demonstration. And that's a good filter for you. And you'll find the companies that find your solution valuable enough to pay you for even the value presentation part of the sale.
Yes, which also, by the way, is usually a signal that they're also going to be a good partner long term. I think that's, oh, okay, we have one more in the back, and then this will be the last one, and then it's time for tacos. I see them waiting lonely outside, so.
Hey guys, really grateful for everything that's going on. I'm a huge fan of NFX as well. And I also know that, you have a background working with artists and also working in the entertainment industry. And our platform is called TAP, and we've created a central place to connect the workforce and all the production assets in entertainment in one place to streamline the entire production workflow for this massive market of over 500 million people. The biggest problem in terms of trying to achieve hyper growth in this B2B market, which is where my question is how do you get past those gatekeepers that somewhat control your ability to achieve hyper growth with the vast majority of the workforce, especially when the NFX model is working, but the gatekeepers are somewhat preventing that ability for that ecosystem to pierce that corporate veil to achieve hyper growth. When, again, the NFX model, it's working, it's there, the people want to connect, they want to work.
I'll take that. Typically, when we have a company like that, what we do is we try to go to like industry organizations. So I would go pitch to, some kind of industry organization where that is the function of them to do it, and get on those talk tracks and get them to do it. So when we were in the outsource space, we talked to the International Association of Outsource Providers around the world, and I pitched to their groups here, there, and yon. And so all of a sudden now the industry association thinks you're the answer. And if you can ever get the industry association, even just 20% of them, to say this is a really good answer, now you kind of got the kingdom because it's coming from the top and you're kind of avoiding the individual gatekeepers down below, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Build a coalition. Try to get other folks, other partners, create a sense of inevitability around what you're doing, that this is the future. And then those folks will at some point get on your side and then start to be your advocates, hopefully, those gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are gatekeepers for a reason, and they don't leave their their gate
Leave their
easily.
post. Yeah. Yes, I mean, my advice is always just go straight to the top. So take that for what it's worth. Thank you all for being here. I really, really appreciate it. This was a great conversation. I love the questions. They were excellent. Feel free to follow up afterwards. We'll be here. We're going to enjoy some tacos. And also, if you want to connect on LinkedIn or anywhere else, don't be shy. So thank you again, and have a great day.